So that part you know. What the part that you don't know, maybe, is that this is also the annual meeting of the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation. We are required to have an annual meeting, and this is it. Keller, who is our affiliated minister, she's from Atlanta, Georgia.
Say that on my background is as a reporter and a columnist and an editor, so I'm going to channel Rachel Maddow when I talk to the kids.
This is being recorded, so I should say it. Okay, she's our vice president for recruitment, membership, and development, and she's also our GA planner. Helps us do the technical stuff about applying for programs, etc., etc. She was fortunate enough to be able to meet Cecile and Monica for that program. I think that was kind of enjoyable for you. But lots of details, updating we've been doing on our website. And a couple more people I'll introduce. Over the age of 80 that you would like to honor who've been doing women's work. And you would like to have a certificate, a picture, an honor, a time to honor them in your congregation, you could contact us through our website and we'll work with you on that. Now there's two things that are coming up in the future that I want to tell you about. We have newsletters that are posted on our website, and you can find out a lot about what we have been doing in our newsletter. There's a place to sign up for our newsletter down at the booth, and we'll send you our last newsletter and then ask you. Now this is another part of the annual meeting that's important. If you want to have your voice counted as one of the voices that speaks up in the UUA for women, join us. You can join our organization for a donation of any kind on the website, and we will be sending you newsletters and email blasts. So we would love to have 5,000 of you sign up on our website. Fairly new is our new Prophetic Sisterhood program, and I'm going to let Reverend Keller tell you just a tiny bit more about that.
Just for the mic. And you're going to have the program soon. So, the new Prophetic Sisterhood, how many of you know about the old Prophetic Sisterhood? That was the original group of Unitarian and Universalist ministers who couldn't find really good places to have congregations in the popular East Coast locations. So they went out to places like Iowa, and they had amazing, amazing ministries. And then when they got real successful, the men came, took the ministries back, and they weren't seen or heard from for 70 years. That's true. We don't want to go away, this generation of UU ministers. I know you think that we're in the majority, but we're still holding on by a toehold. And we want to make sure that we have loud, prophetic, public voices. So this is a group of UU women who preach, teach, blog, do actions, and want to live in our history. So there's almost 150 of us who have come out as women.
In plenary session that we have recently, within about 10 days ago, our board voted to give a $10,000 grant to the Standing on the Side of Love campaign, and that money is to be used to fund scholarships to women leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. Those women leaders often are restricted in the amount of time that they can devote to the work of Black Lives Matter because of child care needs and dependent family member needs. And so these scholarships are intended to support them in those areas so that they can do more. So we're kind of excited about that. We got all the mechanics. Future thing, you also heard me mention this yesterday. I talked about a plan for the fall of 2017, which we decided to call a badass convergence of women, to talk a little bit about the future of women. Now, this is a seed idea at this point in time. However, it's a seed idea which we have planted in Jessica Halperin, that I will introduce in just a moment, who will be kind of heading up our planning committee for that gathering. We don't have all the details yet. Part of that gathering might be by invitational, part of it might be open. We're not yet completely ready to announce the whole plan, but we're glad you like our title. Okay, Sue Boone just walked into the room. This is Heidi Sue. She's our treasurer. She's important. Okay, now when I talked to Jessica about this program, she thought maybe I wouldn't have to do an introduction. I could just let her introduce herself. But I want to say one or two things first before I introduce her. Before I pass it over to her. And she is a person who is a lifelong UU, member. She worked with the youth group, I think, in your congregation from a very, very early age. Her mother is also very active in UUism. And about 2012, what's that, 4 years ago, Jessica was our Clara Barton intern. And after that, she worked in the UUA, now I never remember the name of it. Multicultural Growth and Witness Program. She worked there, and during that time, she worked very hard on the reproductive justice CSAI. And not only that, she almost single-handedly wrote the reproductive justice curriculum, which you can still get on the UUA website. So we're gonna, we'll clap for Jessica. So now I'm gonna turn it over to Jessica, and she can tell you more about what she's doing now.
Cool, thanks. Can you all hear me? Can I use this mic? Okay. Cool. Hi, it's really nice to see you all. What a great turnout. And there will be more people coming in, so if you can just encourage them to find a seat, we're not going to be too interrupted by them coming in and finding a seat. So nice to see you. This is a workshop about the future of gender justice, and I'm so excited for the conversation that we're going to have. Just by way of introductions, I was the Clara Barton intern, and then I worked for the UUA. I also worked in policy advocacy in Washington, D.C. before that with the Quakers. And all the way through all of the work was sort of a basic commitment to understanding and interrupting white supremacy and patriarchy. And those are some themes that run all the way through all of the work that we do. I'll speak for us on the panel. And we want to sort of wonder with each other and with you all how that can inform the future of the work that we're going to do. And I just want to do a quick brainstorm. You all have been sort of interested in gender justice, I'm going to assume, for a little while, right? So what were, if we could popcorn some ideas, what were some themes or some projects or some issues that women were concerned about, let's say in the 40s and 50s? Just popcorn, and I'll say the back of the line. In the 40s and 50s, what were some issues or some themes that people were talking about?
We weren't alive. Getting a loan from a bank. Getting a loan from a bank.
Getting a loan from the bank.
Getting a job.
Sure, right.
Property issues.
Getting a credit card.
Property, credit cards, yeah.
Keeping a job after the war ended.
Well, birth control wasn't legal, abortion was something.
Yeah, abortion. What about in the 60s and 70s? What were some themes or issues that women were talking about?
Sexuality.
Yeah, the last, right? Equal pay.
Plus division of labor.
Division of labor, right?
A misogynist movement.
Misogynist movement.
Yeah. Domestic violence.
Different career paths.
Freedom of sexuality.
Domestic violence.
Abortion rights.
Abortion rights. Yep.
Sexual assault.
Sexual assault.
Healing.
Sexuality.
And the 80s and the 90s. What about issues in the 80s and 90s?
Equal pay.
Equal pay.
Gaining political power.
Gaining political power.
Glass ceilings.
Glass ceilings. Yeah.
The mommy track.
The mommy track. Yeah. Sexual assault. So there's this long arc, right, of issues that people have worked on for a long time, and we're sort of, I think in this conversation we're interested in fleshing that out a little bit more, and also wondering what are going to be the themes or the issues or the people having the conversations, even though lots of people have been having lots of conversations for a long time. And so what are we looking at when we talk about the future of gender justice? I think that's some of the questions that we're hoping to be asking on the panel. So in terms of the workshop of the outline of the workshop, we have a couple of basic questions to get started with the panel.
And then we're going to suggest that you break up into some small groups and just have a little bit of conversation. I know it's really hard in the chairs, but groups of people, maybe 3 or 5 folks, maybe 7 if you're sitting with a clump of people. But try to get to know people who are sitting around you. Maybe have a multi-generational group of folks that you're chatting with, and just respond to the panel. We have some note cards that we'll pass out to the groups, and if a question or 2 pops up in the conversation that you're having, write them down on the note card, and we'll use those to populate the next conversation that the panelists will have. And then we'll have some time for final comments, and we'll close at 4:15. So hopefully, right? I think that's it. I'm gonna ask our very fine and lovely panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get rolling.
Thanks. Okay, so
Stand up.
stand up the whole time, or all right. Okay. Well, my notes are down here. So, hi, my name is Reverend Marisol Caballero, and a lot of people call me Mari for short. And I will tell you a little bit about myself. I am a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. I am born and raised in Texas and proud of it. I'm Chicana, Latina, Tejana. I am currently serving at First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin in Austin, Texas. I am a founding member of an organization in Austin, well, in Texas, but based out of Austin, called Just Texas, and we work on reproductive justice issues within the state of Texas, and we do so from an unapologetically interfaith religious lens. And it's mostly clergy in the organization, but we have some committed lay leaders, such as women from Catholics for Choice and things like that. I was mentored early on from age 19 until she passed away by Marjorie Bowens-Wheatley. And then I was I'm a past recipient of the Marjorie Bowens-Wheatley Scholarship, and wear that proudly. I currently serve on the Drum Steering Committee. Drum is, if you don't know, learn about us. We are a people of color organization that serves the people of color within our UU movement, and currently my position is president-elect of that organization. And let's see, and my last bit of good news is that I have just received a grant from the UU Women's Federation I am on the cusp of Spanish fluency, and this summer I'm gonna learn it good and go out into this, my folks, mi gente, and bring Unitarian Universalism and bring social justice in a deeper way that I've wanted to for a very long time. So thank you, UU Women's Federation. So the first question is, yes, sorry, I'm diving right in. All right, there you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Ranwa Hammamy, and I am currently I just received preliminary fellowship process this past week, so I'm not yet the Rev, but hoping. And I currently serve as a minister with the Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church in Walnut Creek, and will be continuing on as a chaplain resident at a hospital in the year after that. I identify as a Unitarian Universalist Muslim and wear that proudly, and I'm currently one of the co-editors of an upcoming Muslim Voices in Unitarian Universalism text, which will hopefully come out summer, fall 2017. We're working on the details. I am also a very grateful recipient of the Marjorie Bowens-Wheatley Scholarship, and also serve on Drum. This is an awesome pairing. This is great. As the second vice president. And I also wear the hat of being a graduate of the Multicultural Leadership School, which has been a fantastic place for youth and young adults of color to come together and develop their leadership and build community. So I'm a proud grad and actually facilitator of what we now call Thrive as well.
Cool. So the first question that we'll jump into here is, what does gender injustice look like within Unitarian Universalism right now? And I will encourage these brilliant people to be specific when possible. And also, I just sort of wanted to lay a little bit of groundwork here and talk about intersectionality. Have folks heard that term? Yeah. So intersectionality is the framework through which we will be sort of having this conversation, and I'm sure that they will elaborate as they need to. But intersectionality is this idea that that there are overlapping systems of oppression, right? Like based on race, or based on gender, or based on ethnicity, or physical ability, and all of these things, and that the intersectional nature of these systems of oppression means that it's not just sort of an additive, formulaic thing where just where someone is a woman and they receive sort of the impacts of sexism, or then they're a person of color and they receive the impacts of racism. No, it's not formulaic like that. It's complex and fascinating and rich and deep, and we need to be talking about all of the ways that we don't really understand that, or we do understand that, and how can we help other people understand that, and how can we work in those nuances. So that's going to be the basic framework under which we're having these conversations. I will ask the panel, what does gender injustice look like within Unitarian Universalism right now?
Okay, I first want to invite the young woman who just came in. There's a ton of chairs in the front, so please do feel free to come on up. So, gender injustice. I approach this from both justice and injustice. Should I just now?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So my focus of activism has recently been reproductive justice. A lot of you have heard of House Bill 2 that is now law in Texas, and that has, I know, boo hiss, right? That has shut down so many Planned Parenthood and other reproductive health centers, clinics, with ridiculous mandates like widening the hallway by a few inches and this and that and the other that they can't afford to do, so they end up shutting down. And it's going to end in about 6 Planned Parenthoods in the whole state of Texas. And Texas is a very large place, all right? You can drive from, I think it's Houston to El Paso on your way to Los Angeles, and you've already driven halfway to Los Angeles. So it's big. And the reason I focus on reproductive justice is because it's so huge. I mean, people don't realize how huge it is until you really start to get down and talk to the people it disproportionately impacts. In Texas right now, it's disproportionately impacting poor people, and a lot of those are Latinos and Black folks. So, I mean, it's in the Rio Grande Valley, there is absolutely no abortion access. And that is almost all Latino. So for a woman in the Rio Grande Valley currently, she has to, if she wants access to an abortion or decent reproductive health information, contraception, all this stuff that Planned Parenthood does, preventative medicine, she has to get the money together, get a car that'll make it that far, and drive 6 or 8 hours to San Antonio or Austin, find a place to stay, pay for the gas, the food, the lodging, and the services, and sometimes figure out how to get child care for the kids she already has, and on and on and on. People think that mostly women of color are the ones to want abortions. It's actually not true. White women have abortions at the same rate and in some places higher than women of color. But when people think of abortions, they think of the quote-unquote welfare queen and someone who just doesn't know how to keep her legs shut and all this. There's a lot of racism in the reproductive justice debate. So reproductive justice, it's not just healthcare. I want us to think about the privilege of planning the size and when, the who, what, where, how many, when of our families. Right? I mean, do I want children at all? How many would I like to have? Where would I like to raise them? What school might I like to send them to? And on and on and on. So those are questions. How can I be a mother? How can I be a single mother of 5 kids who I want and love while still going to school, while still, so these are the questions. This is reproductive health. It's family planning, not just for the rich. So that's something that I think white UUs don't think about that often, because you don't have to. You're not seeing it impact your community as women of color are, or people of color in general. Also, we don't have free childcare for every single church event at all of our churches. That is a reproductive justice issue. Let's see, also injustice and justice happens on this for gender variant folks within our congregation. Some of our congregations have safe bathroom practices and some of them don't. Some of our churches have very welcoming arms for transgender, gender variant folks. Some of them don't. Some folks feel okay about coming out in their churches, some of them don't. So that's something to think about. I think also where we lack is gender variance education, especially for older generations. It's so, I've seen older generations complaints stalling gender justice issues within congregations because the older folks, usually older women, always older white women, nervous about change. Also, I want to say that being a little uncomfortable is okay. That is, you cannot grow, you cannot learn without being a little bit uncomfortable.
Amen.
Yes! We also need to see, and I won't believe that we've come okay with gender variance until we see some real leadership. Our leadership, people on the board, presidents of congregations, folks in charge of RE. We need to see leadership of people of color and gender variance and all the marginal identities in our leadership. Gender variance, yes. So the spectrum of gender. So there's this old-fashioned notion that there's a gender binary. You're either male or you're female. And my generation and the generations younger have blown up that theory and said, no, actually, you can't tell me how to be. So I can be anywhere on that spectrum. And what I like to explain about it is that if you're looking at it as linear, which a lot of people don't, and that's okay, but this is easy for folks to think of. If you're looking at it as linear, and males on one side and females on another, and there's little hash lines through it like a timeline, imagine that wherever you put those hash lines, there are infinite numbers of hash lines between those. There are so many ways to express one's gender and identify, and that's okay. Also, while we do have a slight majority on the men in our ministry for female identified ministers, that is a great thing, and congregations don't always cringe anymore about calling a woman minister, but young women are often, they often experience in our ministry a lot of condescension, and I'm a part of a Facebook group that's a closed group for women ministers in their 20s and 30s, women ministers in their 20s and 30s, and we try not to make it so. We have a lot of laughs, but a lot of it is a space where we can vent about ridiculousness that we have encountered because we are young and female and an authority as a minister in our congregation. So we go on there and we get a lot of right-on sisters and equivalents. And I've got to say that even the older female ministers, when there is a male minister around, even if he is in a lesser authoritative position, they will get deferred to. They will get deferred to. Even if they are extremely feminist and hate that they are deferred to, they will get deferred to. So, and it happens in my congregation. And let's see, women of color, women ministers of color, women lay people of color. There are so many examples. Every time I guest preach somewhere, there's someone that asks me, what part of Mexico were you born in? I always say Texas. Do you write your sermons yourself? Because they're so impressive. It goes on. People will mistake me for the child care worker while I'm in my robe. Yeah. So, your turn with this question.
I don't know if I'm going to have very much to add to that because that was amazing. But I will maybe expand on a couple of those things and add one or two more things. What I will say on this notion of when it comes to gender variance and gender identity expression, as somebody that also identifies as queer and who chooses to dress in ways that don't necessarily fit what we might call a traditional female attire, there is a level of objectification that comes with that within our congregations. And I can tell you that there have been a few times where a tie has been held quite tightly to say, oh, this is a really cool thing. And that's a little bit of an objectifying of a body. And particularly for a queer woman who chooses to dress a different way, it can sometimes feel a little unsafe. So that's a reality when it comes to queerness within our congregations. And then when it comes to being women ministers, again, there is that level of feeling as though that there is authority and female apparently does not compute. And so there is that level of paternalistic patronizing that can happen when we are, particularly for young women, where terminology like kiddo, yes, I have heard that many a time, can happen. And so it's it's like, oh, you're cute, you're playing minister. And so that's a reality that we really encounter as young women ministers. I will say that a couple of other things around the culture that happens within our congregations is sometimes we don't really talk about the realities that women experience when it comes to being survivors. When women are survivors of abusive relationships or survivors of sexual assault, we don't really embrace that this is a reality that so many of us encounter. And there's a culture of silence around that. And that is a place where we need to be much more vocal. It was for those who were able to attend the Berry Street lecture, and this is related and also unrelated, but there was a call out of the reality of there being ministerial misconduct around sexual ethics and sexual assaults and harassment towards congregants. And we still have that culture of silence and that culture of shame around that reality, and often ignore women when they are speaking up around, not just when it's ministers, but also when they're speaking up about their experiences in the world. And that is something that we do need to be much more, be louder advocates and be more willing to hear what people are saying. Not force people to speak about their experiences, but when somebody comes to us to tell us what their experiences are, we do need to be much more receptive and advocates in that way. So that's what I'll add.
Cool, thanks. Before we get to the next question, I would love to take the moderator's prerogative and ask just a little bit more about queerness and gender variance. Because I think there are ways that especially white Unitarian Universalist women get concerned when the women's agenda starts to include a lot of issues of sexual orientation or gender identity. So I would love it if we could maybe connect the dots a little bit more visibly between some of these issues and how they relate to patriarchy. Do you want to go first?
Okay, well, Ranwa's my homegirl, and we're just about as gay as you can get, but, and that's pretty gay, I happily serve a congregation that has 3 ministers and an intern. We all, and it's serious happenstance, you won't believe me, but serious happenstance, we are all as queer as they come. And that's amazing. And new people come into the church and say, well, is this a specifically gay church, or like, can I be here? I'm straight. And we consider them. But this is not the case in a lot of churches. You're wanting to know how gender variance and queer identity affects our experience in the faith?
I guess I'm sort of interested in the relationship between oppression based on gender identity or sexual orientation and how that is a product of patriarchy.
Yeah.
Right? Does that question make sense about why people who are worried about patriarchy and sexism need to be worried about gender variance and sexual orientation?
So if I had a lot of money and a lot of time, I would do a dissertation on this question, but I don't. So very quickly, I think patriarchy is the reason for not only misogyny and history of women as property, as objects to barter with, to wage war and peace and all of the above, but patriarchy is also responsible, in my opinion, for racism. And for inequalities, economic inequalities, all of it. Now, the reason I say that it's responsible for racism as well as misogyny is that I believe that in our global history, the concern of white folks in big boats when they came across folks that didn't look like them and that weren't pleased about them planting flags on their land was this hypermasculinity, this need to feel powerful, this need to be the big man, the king of the mountain. So that's how racism really got started. And so there's this pyramid, you know, and the order shifts around a little bit in history, who's on the bottom and who's on the top, but it's always been white men on the top. And and women and people of color, and especially women of color, are always on the bottom.
And I mean, just a very basic answer to this question is, if those of us that are interested in sort of addressing patriarchy and wanting to, and why is it important for us to expand it to people with a variety of gender identities and sexual orientations, is because I am a queer woman. I am a woman and queer, so I am a part of this liberation. It is not a full liberative moment against patriarchy if we're not including people of various identities with it. It is something that needs to be continuously expanded, just as it is when it comes to race. That is something we need to continue to build, or else we're not actually having a holistic movement. Yeah, I think that's really all I can.
Yeah, mic drop. Yeah. Cool. One more question before we ask the audience to get into some small groups. I'm wondering what, in your opinions, are the most pressing issues of gender injustice in our movement? And if you feel like getting to it, what are the resources that we have, that you have, to kind of work on those issues?
So I read the question as in our movement or elsewhere, because I think our movement is within the larger world. Yeah. We can't keep ourselves outside of that. So for me, the thing that really gets to me is the really insidious ways that women's bodies have been politicized in a way that they are now tools to encourage the oppression of people with different marginalized identities. And I'm particularly thinking about our transgender siblings and the ways that these horrific bathroom bills have been passed as excuses to protect the safety of women, when in reality our transgender women are the ones most impacted, and they are a part of our movement, they're a part of our liberation, and our bodies, our cisgender bodies, are being, and I'm not saying everybody here is a cisgender woman, but cisgender women bodies are being politicized in a way to say that we need to protect them, so let's demonize other people that need to be that need liberation in our movement. So that's been one thing on my mind. And I will play the Muslim card. I also am incredibly frustrated by the way that, again, the politicization of what it means to be a free woman, what it means to be a woman that has choice over her body, has been used to justify what we call our war on terror. The fact that there are women that choose to cover as an act of their faith, and they are choosing to cover as an act of their faith, and we are using some places where they don't necessarily get that choice, or we are saying that, you know, even if they are saying they choose to do it, they don't actually choose to do it, then we're using that to justify killing people. We're using that to justify really indiscriminate wars that are, we have drone warfare. And so that's the thing that really frustrates me. And there's a concept actually called false consciousness, where we go along with it. Those of us that feel like our liberation is reduced when there are other women that have their own choice in how they're dressing, and it's not our choice. It's a false consciousness of what our liberation looks like. And so that's one area where I've also noticed how the politicization of women's bodies is used to affect people. And then also similarly with immigration, where we are now seeing, again, some really horrific rhetoric about how, I think, I will not speak a name of a candidate, but we have heard political statements made about how immigrants are a threat to the safety of women. And so, again, we are hearing how our bodies are being used to continuously encourage the oppression and marginalization of people.
So I want to piggyback on what you were talking about Islam. I had the privilege last Sunday of preaching on the Muslim concept of rahmah, which is usually inadequately translated or interpreted as mercy. And apparently in the Quran and in just Muslim conversation, the two attributes of God, the two names of God that are most often used are derivative of Rahma, and they are Rahman and Rahmin, and that comes from the root of both of those is the word Ram, which means womb, and so God named the womb after himself is what is understood in Islam. So just shout out to, hey Muslim, and so I've already talked about some pressing issues: reproductive justice, anti-racism, LGBTQ, queer rights, peace movements, I think should be added to that list of issues of gender injustice. Mothers, sisters, you know, we are sending the product of our flesh, our family, into battle, and often a lot of women are putting themselves on the line as well in war. Economic justice and just access to the same luxuries that men get just handed to them sometimes. Resources you use have that inspire or compromise our involvement in these issues I just named. So a word that might offend some, but I wear it as a badge of honor, is chingona. And what chingona means, basically, it can be the equivalent to the F word in Spanish, but most of the time these days it's used mostly like badass, like gutsy, So I have a tank top that says super chingona on it, and I wear it proudly, but not in front of my mom. So I would like to just lift up that as we have a really, really rich history of chingonas, whose footsteps we walk in. So, we've got Susan B. Anthony, Olympia Brown, one of the, if not the first woman ordained in this nation as a Universalist, or maybe anywhere, I don't know. Margaret Fuller, who Susan B. Anthony called, she said of her that she possessed more influence on thought of American women than any woman previous to her time. Beatrix Potter, Florence Nightingale, my Marjorie Bowens Wheatley, and it goes on. And so we got that inspiration, we got those resources, their stories, but we've got so many current chingonas right now, and I'm sitting in a chingona sandwich, and we've got 3 presidential candidates that, we have the problem of trying to decide between the 3, and honestly, there's not one, even though I am Allison Miller, but we will be very blessed, and our future is bright no matter who gets in that office, and that is a great problem to have. We have fabulous elders to look to. We have young women ministers. We have amazing lay women. We have our trans women sisters who are coming out in greater and greater numbers in our congregations. That which compromises what is the question? What compromises involvement in issues of importance to women, I believe, is a culture of whiteness as the norm, white supremacy, in other words. White supremacy does not just mean the Ku Klux Klan. White supremacy is in such subtleness as beige high heel pumps being called nude.
Exactly.
Yes, can I get an amen? And the white silos that our congregations reside in. So many white folks will talk to me about their one friend of color, and are proud of that, and don't have any understanding what the life of other communities, other cultures is like, and what those concerns are. And so presupposition happens in our social action / aka charity, paternalistic work. But and I just have a quick story to tell you about a women's conference I was invited to in Texas a few years back to lead worship for. And I will tell you that I was the only one there under maybe 50 or 60. I was the only one there who was brown, except I came into the hotel late that first night when they had opening worship and stuff. And I was hungry and tired from the drive. I went and got a burger and went to bed. Next morning was worship. I go down for breakfast, and apparently they had some woman belly dancing during worship. And I assume she's brown because no less than 8 people, before I sat down with my breakfast from the buffet, had thanked me for my spectacular performance dancing the night before. Boom.
I do have a couple things to add. I don't know if I really want to follow that story, because that's terrible. But I will say that there are some resources that we can also look to that really emphasize, again, the intersectionality of what it means to do justice and what it means to do gender justice. And one of them we just gave $90,000 to, which is Black Lives of UU, which in their mission emphasizes intersectionality, emphasizes that it's not just black men's lives, but it's all black lives, and that includes transgender black lives, women's black lives, children's black lives, so when we're an immigrant, and etc. And so it is an intersectional movement, and we can look to that movement to lead. And then I will plug it, drum. We also, in our development of our issues and our passion and our mission, we also lift up intersectionality when it comes to our justice effort. And so again, we need to let these voices that we call voices on the margins be the ones that are the people we can look to lead in what it means to do gender justice, to know what a full collective liberation looks like.
ARE.
Oh, and ARE, for those that are not people of color, Allies for Racial Equity, is a great place, thank you Marisol, for you to be engaged in this work from a position of whiteness, but to still be an ally or an accomplice or comrade. Yeah.
Cool. You guys are so brilliant. Thank you. So we're going to break up into some small groups, and I would encourage you not to leave and to stay and to talk to each other, because we're going to pass out some note cards, and some questions from the note cards we'll be able to offer just a few of them in the rest of the time that we have left to the panel. But just also as a way of saying, so the Women's Federation is going to pull together this badass convergence, right? You heard about that yesterday, and it's going to be really cool. We're still very much in the really exciting imagination phase of what this could look like. But one of the ways that, so we're going to collect these questions from these groups, and they will help to inform the structure, the content, and all sorts of other pieces of this convergence. So we need your brilliant questions, not only for the panel, but for the ongoing work of the Women's Federation and the convergence. So I hope that you will find ways to work with these terrible chairs and clump up groups of 3 or 5 or 6, and we'll get some note cards to you. We'll just talk for maybe 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less, depending on how the conversation goes.
I think that we need to get involved with the communities that it most affects, and help them to understand that we are on their side. We, meaning folks with more privilege, with more money maybe, with more access to lawmakers, and then we sit back and we say, how is this affecting you every day? What are your biggest problems? And those are the voices that you are there to help amplify after you ask, how would you like me to help? Let's see, because our lawmakers need to hear all that. Then lobby, 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 yell, 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 organize, organize, organize. The other one is like a white allies group for Black Lives Matter. I will expand that to also other people of color. What does a male allies group look like for you women? Okay, so the work of white allies is not to help people of color. Let me just tell you that right now. The work of men is not to help women. The work of white allies is to understand yourself and each other and the culture that values whiteness over any otherness. And the work of men is to understand those privileges with regard to men and women. So understanding how you were taught patriarchy, how you were taught misogyny, how those lessons of how to be a real man got into your head, and really unlearning a lot of stuff. And then it's taking that show on the road and talking to talk to your men, and then talk to your lawmakers, and really let folks know that, hey, I'm a feminist. And that means I'm an ongoing project. It doesn't mean it's a badge you get to wear saying, I've done it. Here's my honor badge. Here you go.
So one of the questions I have here is, how can we bridge the gap between the older and younger generations? And so one of the things that I come to my justice work with is a spirit of deep gratitude for the work that those who have come before me have done, for the elders that have come before me. And when it comes to understanding that, the younger generations, we have a wider intersectional lens of what it means to do justice, is because we have come into the world with the world is a different one than the one that older generations have come into. And so understanding that we are building upon, we're not erasing the work that has been done, we're not erasing the liberation, we're expanding it. And I think encouraging conversations that remind all of us of that is a way that we can start to bridge those gaps, that we are working for everybody's liberation, not for segmented liberation. So that's the way that I would say, is to start having those kind of conversations. Let's see. What can a cis woman do to help combat patriarchal systems and be more of an advocate to, I'm assuming, the LGBTQ community? And so, so cis woman is somebody that has been, still identifies with the gender identity that they were given at birth, basically. So a cis woman could, can help. One way, the first thing I would say is to listen, honestly, is to listen to what it is that the LGBTQ community needs. And if we're talking about cis women, there are cis queer women, so we also, as a cis queer woman, I do need to listen to the experiences of my transgender siblings and understand what it is that I take for granted, the rights and privileges that have been given to me because I identify as cisgender, that I can't assume are given to everybody that is transgender. So I'd say the first thing is to listen, and then to amplify what the experience is and what the needs are. Because again, this is listening to these voices that are on the margins and making sure that their perspective on what it means to do whole collective liberation is what we are moving towards. And then I don't know if you wanted to share this one. What is the best way to keep up with the evolving language around gender identity and other oppressions?
Yeah, right.
Read the internet.
Yeah, there's a mix. You can read the internet. The internet is a great place to go. And again, we do have resources within our denomination. We do have organizations like Trust, Transgender Religious Unitarian Universalists. I can't remember the full ST, but they are it's a religious professional organization for transgender religious professionals and religious individuals. And so that's an organization that has been doing a lot of this advocacy when it comes particularly to our gender neutral restrooms. That's been a place where they've done a lot of work, as well as advocating for the rights of religious professionals within our congregations.
What I'll add to that, to keep up your savvy, develop intergenerational relationships. Our youth are some of the fiercest, most savvy folks you can ever talk about. I mean, our youth in our congregation have started the practice of their own volition to do gender identity pronouns at the beginning of every single youth meeting. Youth meeting on Sundays, youth meetings at conferences. Like, they don't call them cons in Texas, they call them rallies. But this has trickled out, and in our Renewing the Welcoming Congregation class that I just helped co-facilitate this past year, youth advisors who were in that class told the other folks in the room about this, and they said, well, why don't we do that in all our meetings as adults? And but it's, people think, well, we just did this last week and I know the gender identity of everyone in the room. Well, that was last week. And it can change. It's a spectrum, it's not stagnant. And the youth have seen that happen in their youth group. So where folks are playing around with genders and really trying to get a feel, try one on for a while, try another label on, try a new name. So get to know the folks. Have intergenerational relationships.
It's 4:14. Do you have 30 seconds worth of closing commentary?
Closing commentary. Yeah. So I mean, what I will say here is that you in this room have been charged. You've gotten a lot of prophetic power from from particularly this person. I will this one. But the reality is again, this is a collective movement. We can speak to you, and we will continue to speak to you because that's who we are. But at the end of the day, you have to carry this outside of this room, and you have to tell others what you have heard, and you know this. You know, that's the core of my theology. Is you already know what it means to do this work deep in your heart and soul. And so now it is important for you to go and encourage others to touch that in themselves. So
That was beautiful. She said it.
Okay.
Amen.
Thank you so much for coming. There are a few more note cards, so if Great GA, thanks so much for